Thank you, Jane.
Oh, thank you very much for that, Jane. A wonderful introduction.
Yes, so good.
And thank you, Katie, for joining us today as well. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I feel really intimidated now that I know that your previous speakers have been Frank Bruno and Professor Green and Fiona Phillips. I'm like, I'm really sorry you got the short straw this year with me.
No, I'm really excited to have you here. You've seen some wonderful people there that we've had in the past. I'm sure everyone here is just as excited to see you as well. Jane did a wonderful job there talking about all the stuff that you've been from CBBC to Radio 1, but do you want to sort of tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Jane did a brilliant introduction there. She basically covered it. But I suppose what I do now is I'm a Radio 1 DJ, and I've been doing that for about 6 years. I used to be a children's TV presenter, so I sort of trained as a journalist, worked in the BBC behind the scenes for a few years, got a job as a kids TV presenter, so I used to do the bits in between the shows. CBBC HQ it was called when I was doing it. The Broom Cupboard is what it used to be called, and that's basically what everybody knows it as. So that's what I used to do with Hacker the dog, the puppet dog. Don't know if you've seen much of Hacker.
I'm so excited about Hacker. Yeah, I was hoping he would come out at some point with you, just pop up at the side.
Recently become very famous from the Innocent Men viral meme, which I'm really bitter about because I'm not on that clip with him, and I think we've done loads of other funny stuff that didn't go viral. But yeah, I did that for 6 years, and then when I was working in children's TV, started getting involved with mental health charities, children's mental health charities. Through that, started hosting The Surgery on Radio 1, which a lot of you probably remember because The Surgery is a really long-standing advice show that was on Radio 1 for a long time. Our big boss at Radio 1 was the original presenter of it, and he's now the boss. And it was a phone-in show with a doctor and a presenter, so I started doing that with a wonderful lady called Dr. Rada. And then it became a Sunday afternoon show called Life Hacks. It's basically the same thing, but we play more music, it's longer, and it's a social action show and a mental health show for young people. And so we discuss whatever it is young people are going through every Sunday. And then since then, I've started to do more Radio 1, and I do a Friday morning show, a Saturday morning show now. I often cover the Drive Time show with Jordan North and Vic Hope, and sometimes the Breakfast show when Greg James is off. And yeah, do lots of BBC Morning Live as well. So that's. I'm trained to be a counsellor. I missed that bit out. Which I'll be qualified at the end of November if I finish my assignments. Which I'll be honest with you, it's touch and go.
We'll go quickly so you can get back to revising quickly after this.
Yeah, exactly.
You've always, as you've talked there, about a lot of things to do with mental health and all of that. What sort of got you interested in sort of pursuing that?
Do you know what? It's weird. When I go into schools, and I've actually been to a lot of schools in Humberside, when Hull was the city of culture, the BBC did loads of outreach in Hull, and that's kind of as near as I've been to Grimsby before. And whenever I go and sort of do talks in schools, I always say to kids, like, have a little think about the person that you are in school and in your friendship group, and that's probably who you could be in the working world. So when I was a kid, I look back now, and I never shut up talking at school. I never stopped talking, and when I look back, it wasn't that I was naughty. It was I always had a story to tell, so the teacher would come in and say, right, everyone settle down. And I think, oh God, I'm halfway through a really good story. And now I think, well, for my job on Radio 1, I have to go into studio and I have to talk about whatever's been going on in my life that day, and that's what I love to do. And when I look back now, when I was a kid, I would always read agony aunt pages in magazines. I was obsessed. I'd get a magazine straight to the problem pages. I was obsessed with people's lives and their problems and what they were going through. So I'd always had an interest in it. Then when I was 18, I lost a friend and a cousin to suicide. And I think that was, again, just a turning point in me that I was like, God, something... I don't understand the way that these issues are being dealt with. It doesn't seem right. And I've always really struggled with anxiety, but I didn't know that's what it was. So when I was a little kid, my mum used to take me for tests all the time, asthma tests, stop me eating Smarties, it's food colourings, and no kid wants that, and I was always going, I can't breathe, Mum, I can't breathe, and I was sweaty, I had sweaty hands. It was a nightmare when you're a teenager, you're in school and you're sweaty, it's the last thing you want to be, that just opens you up to being picked on. Could never breathe, the doctors, her lungs are fine, she's fine. No one ever said it's anxiety. Because I was a kid, no one ever said it's anxiety until I turned 17 and went to the doctors, and they said, this is anxiety, it's panic attacks. And I was like, well, I've had this since I was in a buggy, my mum talks about me having these symptoms since I was saying my first few words, what did I have to be anxious about? And so that as well just made me think I really could have benefited from some early intervention, you know, and I didn't. And that anxiety continued. I've now since found out I've got ADHD as well. You know, all these things were kind of bubbling on, no support, no help. All those things make you be an overachiever. I was working myself too hard. I was doing all the qualifications. I was putting pressure on myself. And then I went into possibly one of the worst jobs in the world. Very few have a mental health problem. TV and radio and showbiz. And then it all kind of got to a point where I just sort of had a bit of a breakdown when I was on children's TV, and I was really, really depressed and suicidal. And ended up going on antidepressants and mental health medication, and then that was like, you know, that interest was piqued even more. That was a very long answer, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, I know, I liked it though, I think, and that's all we've got time for. Thank you. No.
And on that happy note, have a lovely evening.
Yeah. So you were saying there that obviously you were in quite a down point in your life. What was the sort of catalyst that made you want to sort of seek help?
I mean, I was in a really awful place, but it's sort of a blur to me now, and I think I've since found out that depression can be like that. You don't often store your memories from that time, you know. And I was just cracking on, and I remember thinking, this is awful, what a horrible way to live, and I'm not brave enough to take any action, and I could never do that to my family, having that already happened in my family and witnessed what that does and how that destroys a family. I'll just have to live like this forever. And I used to think, hopefully I'll get ill. Hopefully something will kill me younger. That's mad to me that I felt that way now. Now I want to live forever. Now I'm like, how can I live? I want to live forever, you know? So to think I ever felt that way is terrible. And it was my mum. I was living at home. I'd been through a big breakup of a 9-year relationship, which was probably another big trigger, you know. And I was living at home again in my mid-20s, 25, and my mum kept coming in my room at night and going, I think you're depressed. And I'd go, get out, I'm fine. And she'd come in and the next night, I think you're depressed. I'm fine, Mum, go out. And then she came in one night and she said, I think you're depressed. And I said, yeah, I think I am, you know. And I don't know, for some reason that day I agreed with her. And then once you've said it, you go, all right, what are you going to do about it then? Okay, I'll go to the doctors tomorrow and we'll get some help for it. So it was my mum's persistence that made me eventually go and sort of get some help, you know. She's good. Like that. She won't rest.
It's good you've got her there then.
Yeah.
It's wonderful hearing, obviously it's very sad that you went through that, but wonderful that you're so sort of open with your mental health journey and things that you've gone through. Do you think that's sort of something that's really important to you, that openness?
Do you know what? I got told by a boss, when I was going through that time, I was at children's TV, and I went on antidepressants, and I'm sure plenty of people here are on them or have been. And, you know, they don't work straight away. You go through a few weeks of sometimes feeling worse. In fact, something that I wasn't told was that when you are young like that, you can have more suicidal thoughts and feel a hell of a lot worse when you first go on them. And I didn't know that at the time. And I remember waking up in the night with these terrible thoughts and reaching for the leaflet and reading it and seeing that was a side effect and going, okay, this will pass. And it did. But I thought, I'm going to lose my job because I'm going to work every day and I'm miserable. And in my job, and you'll get this as well, having done similar roles, you feel like you've got to be the person that's responsible for everyone else's attitude, everyone else's energy.
Yeah.
And if someone's grumpy or miserable in our business, they go, oh God, what a miserable cow, you know. And I was doing kids' TV.
That's like times 10,
times
isn't it?
1,000. You've got to be, you know, jazz hands every day. And I remember one day I was in the makeup chair and I was getting my makeup done, and my producer came and said, hi, Katie, you all right? And I just went, hi. And he went, what's wrong? Are you ill? And I thought, oh God, I've got to put on this act every day that I'm all right. And I used to go and hide in the toilets for 5 minutes, just to have 5 minutes when no one spoke to me. And I'd have a little cry in the toilets. And I thought, I'm going to lose my job here because they're going to think I don't want to be here. And I do. I love this job, but I just can't do it right now. And actually, it's been really good for my own mental health to be open about it, because once I'd told people, and once I'd done quite, you know, interviews and stuff talking about it and put it on my social media, I then felt like if I did turn up to a job and I didn't seem my best, they might think, oh, all right, maybe she's having a bad day, rather than, oh, she doesn't want to be here, or she's got no charisma, or, you know, so it's made me personally, for myself, it's made me go, oh, I can take the pressure off a bit. And what I've enjoyed about it is I now get invited to things like this. I get asked to do work that I care about, because it's really hard to do work you don't care about. It's really hard to turn up to an event and host something when you don't care about the subject. And now most of my work has been in that field. I've gone on to to do more and more work in that field.
And to create an area for you that you might not have had if it hadn't been for that.
And also people come up to me now and just tell me about their problems, which I really like. You know,
it's that agony aunt part of you getting in there again.
And if I'm working on a job, I like to think that people will feel like if they're having a bad day, they can say to me, oh, I'm really struggling today. They won't feel they've got to put that front on that I used to think I'd put on.
Yeah.
I still do put it on. I mean, we all do, don't we? You know, you still feel you
definitely.
have to.
I think, like you say, when you're in this sort of role, there is just a time when it comes on. You have to like smile and go. Yeah.
Show must go on.
Yeah. Oh, you said there as well that you were saying that you have found new ways to get sort of the mental health involved in your work, but you work with a lot of charities as well, particularly with young people. What made you sort of, is it the CBBC sort of history of it, or what made you sort of go into that?
Kind of. I mean, when I started presenting on children's TV, all of a sudden you get lots of charities approach you and say, will you be our ambassador? Will you come and host these events? And I was a bit overwhelmed by it all, and one of my bosses said to me, you're not going to be able to do them all. You physically don't have enough time. So the best way of dealing with this, because you'll feel terrible saying yes to some and no to others, is to just go, I'm going to do one particular type of work. So he said, so think about what you're passionate about. So I said, well, mental health. So I got involved with a couple of mental health charities. And yeah, at the time I was meeting kids all the time, you know, doing events, and I would meet these like little girls and see the same symptoms in them that I saw in myself, and they'd have the same little stress cough. They'd be, you know, same little cough that I had as a kid, or the clammy little hands, or the breathing. Or I go into secondary schools, and I would see that the girls in particular, but of course it's boys too, just hated how they looked, and they'd have selfies with me, but they'd cover up their face. They'd either put the dog emoji on, the filter thing, or they'd just chop their face off, or they would put a hand in front of their face. And I was like, what are you doing? Get your face in the photo. And so I would like see them and see these things and be like, oh God, I just, you know, wish someone was helping them. So I think, yeah, a bit of the fact that I wanted that early intervention myself. I didn't know I wanted it, but I could have done with it. And being in the CBBC world meant that I kind of got into that.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. I know you were actually, when we were outside, when we first met, you were talking to a group of young people at that point. I can see obviously your passion to talking with and working with young people, and obviously you're on the BBC Radio 1's Life Hacks as well. Is there any advice that you would offer to people, young people generally?
I always give the same piece of advice that one of my producers at CBBC used to take the mick out of me whenever I was going to a school. He'd go, are you going to tell them all to be themselves? You know, that's like the cliched piece of advice that you give everybody. And I was like, yeah, I am actually. Because, you know, I feel like through years of training to be a counsellor, years of going through therapy myself, years of doing all this stuff, it does all come back to that. And I think particularly for that age group, it comes back to being yourself. And I think you spend a lot of time in those years pretending to be something you're not, and I really did, you know, pretending to be smarter than I was when I was in those groups, pretending I'd read books I hadn't read when I went to uni, pretending to be into music I wasn't into, pretending to just doing things to kind of fit in with the crowd, and it's the most exhausting thing for your mind you can do is in some way not be yourself, whether that's in your job, in your relationship, in your friendships, in your family, in your general lifestyle. If you're not kind of expressing your true self, I think that's where a lot of those problems stem from, and I think that's kind of what's happening for those years. So that's something I always try and hammer home. Also, one of my favourite quotes is, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. So I'm always hammering home how important it is, you know, to make sure you've got the people around you that enrich you and leave you feeling good. Because I think on reflection now I've realised that that's definitely a big thing too. I do believe that you sort of become the 5 people you spend time with, you know?
Oh, definitely. I think, yeah, when you get in new relationships and things, you find out new things you enjoy and all of that. You've said as well, talking with these children and younger people and sort of meeting those people often, have you found that there's sort of a recurring issue that they always want to talk to you about, or is it sort of everybody's as different as everybody else? Or? It's
funny, I did a book for 10 to 16-year-olds a few years ago when I was on children's TV, and it was an agony aunt book, basically. So I wanted to create what is in those magazines in a book. So I went out to schools and we sort of put it out in Top of the Pops magazine and Girl Talk magazine on social media, and we got sort of real 10 to 16-year-olds to message in with their problems. And such an overwhelming amount of them were about homework. It was just like so funny. I was like, why? Like, it was like we had all these different piles, and we had sort of like family problems, bullying, sexuality, and then it was like homework. And I think that was maybe because a lot of them were filling those out in school. So they were like homework and like exam stress. I definitely think exam pressure is a big one. if I could put it down to one word, I'd say pressure. You know, I think it's lots of different problems, but I think pressure is the key word that you're feeling at that time. You know, you want to be, you want to get a good job, you want to, you know, get a girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. You want to be popular, you want to impress your parents, you want to be good looking. There's so much pressure on you at that time to do all those things. And doing life hacks, you know, we get all kinds of different issues. Of course, yeah, people having issues coming to terms with their sexuality. Climate anxiety is a really big one amongst that generation, actually, that I think perhaps us older people don't feel in the same way. Social media is obviously a really big one. But yeah, I would say just pressure to get a good job, pressure to buy a house, all that stuff, just the pressure of transitioning from kid to adult.
Yeah, obviously, from my childhood, and I think we're a similar age, so I think there was obviously always those pressures around, but obviously you mentioned social media there. We were sort of the first generation with the internet really freely available. Yeah. But do you think young people today have to come up against different pressures than we did?
Yeah, I think, you know, I mean, I can only speak for the 34 years I've been alive, but I feel like the problems have always kind of been the same, but maybe they are just, present themselves differently now. I think those pressures have always been there. We've always worried about getting jobs, about, you know, putting food on the table, about impressing our parents, about getting a partner, about how we look. I think those issues have always been there, but they're perhaps just different now. It's a completely different kettle of fish now. You put sort of social media into the equation. And yeah, is it worse? I suppose. I don't know, and maybe people that were alive in the war would say, no, it's not. No, it's not worse that you've got Instagram. So I think it's really hard to compare time frames like that, isn't it? But I think social media definitely brings up a massive amount of problems. You can't escape all that stuff now. You can't escape the body image pressures. You can't escape the bullying, you know.
No, I think even when you're an older age now, where you're not maybe sort of 15, or there's still pressure even for everybody. We get like houses, like holidays, things like that people are still going, what are you doing? Is my holiday better than your holiday? Is, you know,
totally. And I do think as well that pandemic gap that everyone's talking about now, which is sort of like the catch-up that's happening, particularly if you're in any of those transitionary ages, I think. So if you were at school, or you were going from primary school to secondary, or you're going from secondary to college, or college to uni, or uni to job, if you're in any of those stages, I think, over the past few years, I do think there's been a gap in development, perhaps, and people feel like they've lost a load of their years. Yeah. And I'm seeing it a lot on life hacks, you know, of women my age who are sort of in their mid-30s and haven't had children maybe, and maybe haven't got married yet, haven't found a partner, and they've got like, I was 30 when I went into the pandemic, and all of a sudden I'm 35, and you know, it's feeling like there's been a lot of missed opportunity because of that. And I think that's been more apparent in those ages where so much changes, doesn't it? Think of what changes between being 11 and 16 in that time that you're at school. What changes between being 16 and 21? You're two different people completely.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, we're only just really out of the pandemic. Do you think there'll be sort of a long-term issue with some of those people as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, mental health works that way, doesn't it? You don't see the effects immediately. These things happen over years, so I suppose we'll be catching up with it for sure.
Yeah. We talked briefly about social media as well, and that impact on young people. With these different areas that children and young people have available to them now, do you think it affects the way they sort of seek help with their mental health?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I suppose it probably does. You know, the whole Dr. Google thing is bad enough for our generation, isn't it? But certainly there's probably a lot of unsolicited advice going out there on social media. Something we've covered a lot on Life Hacks is diagnosing happening on TikTok. So this is something we see a lot. So I see video after video telling me I've got ADHD because I sleep with my hands like this, which I do, to be fair, with paws, little T-Rex. If you sleep with T-Rex paws, apparently that means you've got ADHD, but don't quote me on that.
When I'm in bed later,
Dr.
I'm going to be like wearing my hands.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if that's true. I think I'll have arthritis early doors because I sleep like that. But you're constantly being diagnosed every time you go on, and we've had conversations on the show about how helpful that is. I'm very pro-diagnosis. I think that sometimes putting that name on anxiety, depression, you know, anorexia nervosa, binge eating disorder, ADHD, autism, I think that can be so helpful in making you realise that you're not weird, it's not you that's done something wrong, it's a recognised health problem, it's not your fault. It's something that can be dealt with, not a health problem necessarily, but it might be just be that you're not neurodivergent, your brain works differently. I think that can be really helpful. But we've certainly had conversations on our show about whether there can be too much labelling, and whether there can be convincing people they've got something. To be honest, I don't think you can convince someone they've got a problem. I think if someone's got a problem and they want help, they deserve to access that help.
Yeah,
I don't think people will necessarily wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to go and access some help for my mental health for the hell of it. I think everybody
what
needs
can I have
that.
Today?
Yeah. I think everybody needs that help is what
to be able to get that
is
help
the situation. Yeah, and it's just that there's varying degrees of severity, you know.
Okay. So well, we talked about social media there, but do you think there are different ways now that young people can seek mental health help if they want to? Or do you think it's still the sort of traditional routes that people take?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps I don't really know the answer to that question. I feel like everybody here probably knows a lot better than I do about how that works. You know, I've been doing my placement as a counsellor, and certainly when people are coming to me, they've been referred by a GP or they've kind of self-referred, but I don't know sort of how else that happens for young people. Again, I work with a lot of charities as well, of course, and I know that can be a really sort of helpful way of. So I think there's lots of different ways now of accessing that support for sure as well. You know, if the waiting lists are long, there are charities. And
do you think the stigma is still there for younger people? I know when I was growing up, the idea that you had any mental health issue or needed any help with anything to do with your mental health, you'd almost be ostracised for it. Whereas do you think it's sort of developed now where younger people have more of an understanding that actually everybody has mental health and it's about looking after it?
I think so. I have a lot of faith in that younger generation. The listeners of Life Hacks and the people that we get involved in, the kids that I meet in schools, their attitude is completely different. And that's why charities like Place to Be, who I work with, that provide counselling in schools, I think if like in all schools it was just the norm that you have a counsellor and people go and see the counsellor and they mention it, and it's not like, oh, you're that one kid in the school that's the problem child because they've got to go and see a therapist, which is how it felt when we were younger, like you say. The more we can do of that, the better. And their attitude is completely different, you know, even just the way they talk. The way they will do TikToks and Instagrams about their mental health, the way they've even got terms for things that we didn't have terms for, FOMO, you know, that's a real big part of anxiety, fear of missing out. We never had a word for that. Like, it's something I've struggled with my whole life, but we didn't have a word for it, and then Gen Z made a word for it. Like, they just make a word for everything, and I think it's brilliant because we need these terms to be able to go, oh, everyone's dealing with that. They're talking about it on Radio 1 today. Everyone's experiencing that thing. Okay, it's normal. So, yeah, I think the stigma is a lot better, but I still think there's a lot of people who have the same attitude. You know, I'll be honest with you, I'll sometimes go on and read an article on the Daily Mail, but usually written about one of my sort of colleagues, and I'll look at the comments, and there's still a lot of people that are, oh, God, everyone thinks they've got something wrong with them. I did a film for Morning Live about the relationship between binge eating and ADHD, because I've suffered with binge eating disorder for quite a few years. And ADHD, yeah. And I didn't know that was a thing, that they thought there was a link, until I was working with a producer one day on Morning Live who said there's this link. And for years on Radio 1, people had texted me and said, I think you might have ADHD, Katie, and I just ignored it. And I think I probably held a bit of that stigma of, oh, everyone thinks they've got ADHD these days, everyone's aren't we all just a bit neurodivergent? You know, I think I probably held some of that stigma despite having, you know, worked in this world for so long. And people would text in when I was talking about fussy eating or not liking certain textures or leaving my suitcase on the train again, which was all just like funny stuff to talk about. And they would send really nice messages, and it would be ladies going, hi, Katie, I'm a woman in her 30s, and ADHD goes quite undetected in women, adult women. You know, I think you should get checked out. I just ignored them until this producer said to me, oh, I want to make a film about the connection between ADHD and binge eating. And I was like, sorry, what? There's a connection. Anyway, I did a film for Morning Live about it, and the Daily Mail did an article about it, and it was like my first brush with the Daily Mail, and I was like, oh, God. And the comments were just all people going, oh, it's just an excuse to be fat, an excuse to eat, you're greedy, you're lazy, like all these celebrities, they want an excuse. Every celebrity thinks they've got something wrong with them, they're jumping on a bandwagon, da-da-da. So I see that a lot in adults still. That stigma's really there. So I suppose I've got faith in the younger generation, but that's got to fight through, because they're going home to maybe parents that have that attitude.
Of course.
And so we've got to fight through and push that message so that attitude dies out. That'll die with us, hopefully.
Yes, time for that to go, definitely. Well, it's been obviously wonderful chatting with you here today, but as well as this, wasn't the beginning of your Navigo visit. You've been touring lots of facilities today. How have you found the look around? I am so impressed. I don't think I've not met a single person today that hasn't just radiated joy and seemed so lovely, and that's so rare to visit an organisation. And I know you're having a fun day today. I know this is probably, I'm sure you have much harder days at work than this, but still, it's really reflective of the company as a whole, I think. And those facilities are so good. I've never seen anything like it. And I've done a lot of visits of mental health facilities. The Harrison House, I was particularly impressed with, because a lot of my clients will say to me, especially the young people, we'll go through a safety plan if we're worried about risk, and they will say, I won't go to A&E. And I'll say, you can go to A&E. And they'll say, I won't go to A&E. I don't want to go to A&E. I'm not walking in an A&E. I've been there before. I don't like it. I'm scared I'll be sectioned. And so the fact that I walked in that today at Harrison House, I thought it was a cafe. I was like, hi, everybody. I thought it was just like a nice cafe. The fact that that's where you can go, and it's specifically for people who are in crisis with their mental health, it's unbelievable. If that was in every town, we would be in a much better place. And I wish it was. I really wish it was. I've been asking questions all day to everybody. I think I've probably driven all the lovely people that have shown me round mad, because I've just been like, and what about this? And how does it work? And how is it funded? And what, is this the only one like this? Are there any others? Because I'm just like, why is this not in Manchester, where I live? Why is this not everywhere? Why is this not in Oldham, where I do my placement for the NHS? And I find that people are coming in and they're coming in for counselling, but actually that's only scratching the surface. They need so much social support, and I feel like I'm, in this desperate position of trying to help them, but they need a much more collaborative approach, which is what it seems like you've got. I wish this could be anywhere. So my last question is, how can this be everywhere? That's a good question.
Can Navigo be in every city? Because I'm threatening to give up my career and move to Grimsby now, just so that I can access this mental health support, and my mum and dad one day can go into the elder care that you've got, because I've got relatives in care homes at the moment with dementia, and it's terrible. Their experience is terrible. It's amazing. So you all do a brilliant job, and you've succeeded in converting me. I'm Team Navigo.
That's what we like. Well, like you say about Navigo going everywhere, it has now become an all-age provider, and we're sort of dealing with younger people. Do you think there's a sort of key focus that Navigo should be looking at with younger people?
Well, I know you heard directly from some of the young people that access your services this morning, which is absolutely where to go, because I'm certainly not the expert. And I was chatting to some of them outside, and they were lovely. I think, and they did sort of back me up on this, something that I feel like I hear time and time again is when people turn 18, they're sort of thrown into adult services, and it shouldn't just be like, right, your date of birth, and that means right now you go into this other service, when you might be in the middle of some really good care and some really important care, and you've got a relationship with the people you're working with, and it's really working. That's the sort of thing that we get wrong, I think. And so I think that's key. And I know that you are looking more at a 16 to 25 model, is that right? Which I think is brilliant. That age group, that works, I think. And I also think, and you do this really well from what I've seen, making it the norm, making it seem like everyone does this. Everyone has mental health problems, and everyone has to access counselling and therapy every now and again, or go onto medication, or perhaps be in overnight in a facility, or making that just the norm, so that no one feels like we did when we were younger, where you're the school weirdo if you need to access some help. And I think that's massively changing, and what I've seen from your services today is that clinical environment is not here. It does feel like that's just something people need, and something people benefit from, so I think keep up the good work with that.
Oh, thank you very much for that. Well, I think that has meant that we've now reached the end
Sorry,
of our
yeah, so
time
probably
here today. I
gone
could
over,
stay,
haven't we?
do another half an hour.
I
We'll just
know.
keep going. It'll be fine. But thank you so much
Thank
for
you so
talking
much.
with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for
And
having me.
Yeah, let's hear it up for Katie.
Thank you. Thank you, guys, and thank you to you as well. Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate it.